Hi there, welcome to the Discover Brazil channel, and my name is Matheus. If you want to know more about Brazilian culture and history, if you want to visit Brazil, or if you want to learn Brazilian Portuguese, you are in the right place. Today will be our first Brazilian Portuguese lesson, and as you can see on this slideshow, our topics will be 1. Personal pronouns, 2. The verb to be, and 3. Adjectives and nouns. If you don't speak Portuguese at all, at the end of this video you will be able to build your first sentences in Portuguese. If you already speak some Portuguese, you can use this lesson to reinforce what you have already learned, expanding your vocabulary and recalling some basic rules of grammar. So stay with me and let's learn some Portuguese. Okay, first topic, personal pronouns. In this lesson we will study the subjective pronouns or nominative pronouns. A subjective pronoun acts as a subject in a sentence, and in English they are, as you know, I, you, he, she, it, we, you, they. We don't have a pronoun equivalent to it in Portuguese. We use other pronouns to refer to things for which English speakers use the pronoun it. Since everything has a gender in Portuguese, we use the pronouns equivalent to he and she, or even a demonstrative pronoun as the Portuguese equivalents of they, the Portuguese equivalents of these and that to refer to these things. This is the list of the subjective pronouns in Portuguese. Eu, tu, ele, ela, nós, vós, eles, elas. This is how they appear in grammar books, and that is how we study them in school. However, we will replace 2 of these pronouns for our lessons. The first pronoun to be replaced will be the pronoun tu, which is a classic way of saying you, like the Old English thou in Shakespeare and the Bible. This pronoun is still used in Portugal and in many regions of Brazil, but in Brazil the pronoun você is more common and it is preferred on television and in newspapers, for example, as well in most everyday conversation. Okay, so the pronoun você. Moreover, it is easier to conjugate verbs with the pronoun você. It is easier to conjugate verbs used with the pronoun você because it uses the same forms of conjugation as the pronouns ele and ela, which mean he and she. The second pronoun to be replaced will be the pronoun vós. It is another classic pronoun, the Portuguese equivalent of je in Old English, and in my opinion it is very elegant. But the truth is that it is no longer used, not even in Portugal. There are some exceptions. It is used in religious contexts, as in Catholic masses, and maybe by elderly people in some regions of Portugal. So it is elegant, but not really useful. Instead of vós, we will use the pronoun vocês, which is the plural of você, and it shares its form of conjugation with the pronouns eles and elas, which mean they, for masculine and feminine objects, respectively. So, once again, this will facilitate our learning, okay? And about those pronouns we will not be using, tu and vós. If anyone is really interested, I can talk about them in a future video, okay? So, let's repeat the pronouns. Okay, so, eu, você, ele, ela, nós, vocês, eles, elas. There is something I should say about the pronouns você and vocês. Sometimes in spoken language people say se or sis. The first two letters are cut. It is common and it is not wrong, okay? It is just colloquial. It is sort of like saying what you're gonna do, meaning what are you going to do in English. It is a faster way of talking and it is less formal, but it is used a lot. By the way, Portuguese uses different punctuation marks from English, as you have already noticed in the list of Portuguese pronouns. These marks, they help you pronounce the words correctly. They accent some parts of some words, okay? Like this apostrophe above the letter O, the letter O in nós, or this little upside down V over the letter E in você and vocês. I'll talk about this subject in a future video. Okay, let's go ahead. Pronoun they. As I have already told you, there are two ways to say they in Portuguese. You can say eles for a group of males or masculine objects, and you can say elas for a group of females or feminine objects. So eles and elas. You may ask yourself, what about those groups which include both male and female? Well, in this case you can quote both pronouns. You can say eles e elas, or elas e eles, or you can just say eles, because in this case the male pronoun predominates in Portuguese. There are two other pronouns, or four if you consider the singular and plural forms separately. I would like you to learn now. These pronouns are o senhor, which means gentleman or sir, a senhora, which means ma'am or lady, and in plural, os senhores and as senhoras. When you talk to older people, or when you want to show respect for some reason, for example, if you are talking to your boss, you may avoid using você. Instead of você, you should say o senhor when addressing a man, a senhora when addressing a woman, os senhores for a group of men, and as senhoras for a group of women. And in cases of mixed genders, it's the same that we have already seen, okay? You can say os senhores e as senhoras, you can say as senhoras e os senhores, or you can just say os senhores, because once again the male gender predominates in Portuguese. You conjugate verbs with these pronouns the same way you do with ele, ela, and você in singular, okay? Ele, ela, and você, which mean he, she, and you in singular, okay? And for plural, you conjugate the same way you do with they, with eles and elas, which mean they, and vocês, which means you and plural. In some cases, the person you are talking to may say, não precisa me chamar de senhor, pode me chamar de você. This happens a lot in Brazil, because we tend to be much more informal than our friends from Portugal. But if you really want to be respectful, be formal at the beginning of a conversation and then get more informal if the other person allows you to. Pay attention. In Portuguese, you can say o senhor or a senhora to treat the person with whom you are talking. You say this directly to person. These are third-person pronouns, but in this case, you don't use it to refer to someone else. You use this to refer to the person with whom you're talking. You call the person this way. For example, you can ask, "Como o senhor está?" which means, "How are you, sir?" But you can also use these words to refer to someone else, to someone who is not participating in that dialogue. For example, you can say, "Ele é senhor honesto," which means he is an honest gentleman. And you can say, "Ela é senhora gentil," which means she is a gentle lady. Second topics, the Portuguese verbs for to be. The first thing you should learn about the verb to be is that there are two states of being in Portuguese, two verbs for to be. Okay? This is pretty normal for Portuguese native speakers, but it can be tricky for foreigners depending on how your mother tongue treats this idea. So here in the center of the screen you can see the verb to be in English. I'm going to put an arrow to the left, and here you can see the Portuguese verb ser, which is one of the translations of the verb to be. And here we have another arrow pointing to the right, to the verb estar, which is the other translation. So, what is the difference between these two verbs? Basically, the verb ser is used for conditions which are permanent, conditions that don't change or don't easily change. On the other hand, the verb estar is used for transient conditions, conditions that can easily change. So you can use the verb ser for permanent conditions like he is tall, or conditions that can change but they don't usually change, like she is blonde. And you can use the verb estar for conditions that easily change. For example, he is seated. Well, this may become confusion because these concepts are subjective and also there are some exceptions, but don't worry, you will learn it soon as you practice the language and it will become natural for you. We're going to look at some examples in this video in order to make it easier to understand. But first, let's learn how to conjugate each verb. The first verb, verbo ser, is an extremely irregular verb. It means that each form of the verb is a word very different from the other form. And it is the same as in English. You say I am, but you say you are and he is. They are three completely different words. In Portuguese, it is the same for the verb ser. Let's pronounce it. Verbo ser. Eu sou, você é, ele é, ela é, nós somos, vocês são, eles são, elas são. Now, verbo estar. Eu estou, você está, ele está, ela está, nós estamos, vocês estão, eles estão, elas estão. Notice the symbol above the letter A. This is another of the punctuation marks that are specific to Portuguese. Its name is tio, and it indicates that the letter should be nasalized. Yes, you need to use your nose to pronounce the letter, and depending on your mother tongue, it can be hard, because many languages don't have this sound as English itself. But of course, this can be learned. Try to notice the difference. When I say a, it comes more from my throat. When I say it comes more from my nose. This sound is sort of like if you mixed the sound of the letter A with the letter N. A with N. Difficult? Well, don't worry. I will record a video exclusively on the subject soon. Okay guys, it is getting late and I need to rest, so I will resume our lesson tomorrow. This will take me one day, but it will take only a few seconds for you. Okay, so hello, I'm here again. I'm back after a day and let's move on. Okay, let's use a noun. Let's use the noun estrangeiro, which means foreigner, to build our first sentences. Pay attention. This letter A, the letter A is pronounced A in Portuguese, okay? So I will say as it is pronounced in Portuguese. So the letter A in estrangeiro should be nasalized as it had the chill above it. Well, it doesn't have the chill above it, but it has the letter N. I mean, it is followed by the letter N. Okay, as the N is pronounced in Portuguese, N. And in Portuguese, when a vowel is followed by the letter N, it means that this vowel should be nasalized. Estrangeiro. Estrangeiro. Listen to it. I'm a foreigner. Eu sou estrangeiro. Or you can say eu sou estrangeira if you are a woman. You are a foreigner. Você é estrangeiro if you are talking to a man. Or você é estrangeira if you are talking to a woman. But if you are talking to someone about him or herself, you are more likely asking them a question rather than making a statement. Well, it is easy to turn these phrases into questions in Portuguese. Unlike English, you just need to change your intonation to ask something in Portuguese. So the statement você é estrangeiro becomes the question. Você é estrangeiro? Or você é estrangeira? Which means, are you a foreigner? He is a foreigner. Ele é estrangeiro. She is a foreigner. Ela é estrangeira. We are foreigners. Nós somos estrangeiros. If you are part of the group you are talking about, okay? If you are part of a group which includes only men or both men and women, you can say nós somos estrangeiros. But if you are part of a group which includes only women, you say nós somos estrangeiras. You are foreigners. Vocês são estrangeiros. Or vocês são estrangeiras. Are you foreigners? Vocês são estrangeiros? You can ask. Or vocês são estrangeiras? You can ask. They are foreigners. Eles são estrangeiros. Or elas são estrangeiras. Okay, let's repeat all these phrases one more time. I'm a foreigner. Eu sou estrangeiro. Or eu sou estrangeira. You are a foreigner. Você é estrangeiro. Você é estrangeira. Are you a foreigner? Você é estrangeiro. Você é estrangeira. He is a foreigner. Ele é estrangeiro. She is a foreigner. Ela é estrangeira. We are foreigners. Nós somos estrangeiros. Nós somos estrangeiras. You are foreigners. Vocês são estrangeiros. Vocês são estrangeiras. Are you foreigners? Vocês são estrangeiros. Vocês são estrangeiras. They are foreigners. Eles são estrangeiros. Elas são estrangeiras. Now let's learn the verb estar. Remember that it is used for conditions which are changeable.